as an opening question, to set out what a realistic worst-case scenario could look like after Brexit?
If we start off, I think, with the medical radioisotopes, the worst-case Brexit scenario covers a number of issues. First off, diagnostics. We import about 80% of the medical radioisotopes used in diagnostics, which is there's about 1 million procedures, both diagnostic and therapeutic, a year. We import about 700,000 of those. The facility to manufacture them in the UK does not exist at the present time. The other 20%, you can do some substitution, but the capacity there is limited to increase the amount of radioisotope, and also the cost of those radioisotopes are much more than the ones we import. So you're talking a significant proportion of patients with cancer, with heart disease, with bone disease, with thyroid disorders, for example, not having rapid access to diagnostic imaging, not having an assured diagnostic pathway, not being able to know, for example, whether they've had an improvement in their cancer, whether the cancer has spread. We can talk about that being in terms of, can we use other tests? Yes, we can, but the workforce that provides the medical radioisotope tests and the workforce that provide the other tests are not the same. They're not cross-trained, so there's a lack of nimbleness there to transfer across. If we talk then about the treatment of cancer, which is done both by what we call unsealed sources, so medical radioisotopes that you either ingest or you take in by mouth or we inject into you. These cure patients with predominantly thyroid cancers if we don't have an assured supply of those. Again, the reduction in the rate of cure is more people are going to die of their thyroid cancers. We probably treat about 2,000 people a year in the UK for thyroid cancer. Then if we talk about the unsealed sources which are used for specific types of radiation therapy called a brachytherapy, which is not cancer from the outside, it's cancer into the specific organ. The major use of that is iridium, which is used in cervical cancer. There are about 3,600 ladies diagnosed with cervical cancer in the UK per annum, and the brachytherapy is an essential part of their treatment. Despite advances in technology, we still rely on that for a cure rate in about 500 cases per year. We have to deliver the treatment as a combination of external beam and the afterloading, the brachytherapy. The external beam takes 42 days. If we don't deliver the whole treatment within 56 days, there's a reduction in cure. So you're talking about, if you don't have sustained, assured pathways, you cannot be sure that those patients will receive the best form of therapy that they could receive. In terms of medical devices, that's not so much our area of expertise, although our interventional radiology colleagues use them a lot to prevent surgery. So again, there's capacity issues. If you're going to take away from a medical device and require surgery, you need to expand your surgical capacity. And that also holds true, for example, for treatment of benign thyroid disease, so overactive thyroid. If you can't use radioactive iodine, which is used very commonly, you may have to increase your surgical capacity, and it's very difficult to be nimble to shift that in the short term. For research, we're also very worried about a lack of supply, partly because we are a net benefiter from research investment in the UK, and about 15% of the academic workforce comes from the UK. So the worst case scenario is that patients in the UK no longer have access to innovative trials as easily. We are not looked upon. If we diverge in a regulatory fashion from trial protocols in the UK from Europe, then actually we may suffer a significant disadvantage in our patients being accepted for clinical trials.
Thank you. Andrew?
Probably one of the worst case scenarios imaginable is that we're not ready, and there will be significant disruptions to supply chains. And pardon the pun, but people might not be clear how to clear goods. with the result that ports might be clogged up, so even legitimate trade might be behind in the queue compared to other people. Systems might not be ready, with all the implications for how companies could be compliant, follow-on impacts on logistics operations, which might be delayed, but it might also relate to non-regulatory issues such as questions such as where to find staff, such as in warehousing or trucking and the like, where we do rely on EU member state labour.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you. Much of my members' concerns are common with Martin's and indeed with Andrew's, but I would think uniquely what our members do are subject to the rules of the single market. So we depend on free movement of goods within the European market in order to import into the UK. And that is brought about by, as you have read from our submission, our written submission, brought about this exhaustion of rights principle which applies within the single market. Without that, then we cannot continue to provide the competitive effects on pricing in medicines in the UK that we currently do. And indeed, our members can be much more reactive than the originator manufacturers in bringing medicines to the market when there are shortages in the UK.
So for you, it's not only supply, it's about the cost and the
Yes.
increasing costs of medicines. And just before I move on to other areas to look in more detail, as a broad brush, what are your thoughts about what absolutely has to be done to improve resilience?
It would be on March the 30th to carry on as we are from medicine supply, because as far as our members are concerned, their businesses, they can't plan for uncertainty. Uncertainty is where we are at the moment. And come March the 30th, when we've left the EU, then we would be able to work on how the arrangements are going to work post being in the EU. And so I'd suggested a transition phase of at least 2 years is what is needed. We have certainly been talking to the MHRA and the Department of Health about these issues in very much the same way I'm talking to you now. So they're fully aware of it, and I think and the MHRA is a very good regulator and has done worldwide distinction, but they cannot, without a political guideline and with the best will in the world, work out what the post-EU world's going to be like. So I think for us, it is carry on immediately after leaving the EU as now, but then work on what the new arrangements are going to be.
Thank you. Jeanette.
I think I would echo that. Whatever happens, we need to be able to assure the supply as quickly and as efficiently with no disruption as we do now. Without that, there will be an implication on patient care, there will be an implication on diagnostics. Patients will be being diagnosed and being treated as if there will be an uninterrupted supply up to that date, and if there isn't at that time, those individual patients would be disadvantaged.
It's almost a question of what resilience is, and one of the tenets of preparing organisations to be resilient is to understand how procedures currently work. Given that trade logistics is incredibly complex with many different parties involved, it's an exercise that's probably no one never needed to do so far. So working out what the baseline is so that you can prepare for an event that requires resilience, be it Brexit or anything else, requires preparation. And my sense is in many areas, this is the first time we had to engage with questions like this. And certainly when you speak with companies, understanding when to take action, understanding their relationships up and down the supply chain, their contractual arrangements, these are complex systems, so it's very difficult, even for the people right at the heart of it, to even predict what might happen. So there's uncertainty, but there's also many unknowns.
So do you think people have put all their eggs in the transition basket? Do you sense that your colleagues are active, that people are actively preparing for even there not being a transition?
I'm aware that some organisations are beginning to think about it, but very practical things. I am in academia. I know, for example, in the United Kingdom, not many organisations provide something very basic such as training. Other member states in the European Union are much better prepared. They have, for example, a profession of customs professionals. My sense in the United Kingdom is if you work in trade and customs, it's something you sort of happen to stumble upon by accident, and it's a very, very small community. In other member states, there might be thousands at hand. And I've spoken to some freight forwarders and logistics service providers who have struggled to find expertise in this country and almost jokingly suggest, but I do know I can find them in Poland or Serbia and places like that.
Richard?
Resilience is indeed hard to plan for us too, because essentially this is a black and white, an existential issue for us, because without, in a certain set of circumstances, my members' business would cease to exist altogether. So very difficult to make investment plans for the future in this and in other areas of legislation and regulation like the Fossilized Medicines Directive.
Thank you.